Sean in a few minutes. But just before that, I wanted to give you some idea of what we're going to cover. So it's be talking about Sean's career pathway and how he's got to where he's got, a bit about Bryden Johnson themselves, and also the ways into a career in accountancy. If you've got any questions before we come to the Q&A, please use your chat facility at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and get to you as soon as possible. Please feel free to answer questions because it is supposed to be a two-way program, if you like. Natasha, my colleague, is here and she'll be helping run this webinar. And I think now it's just over to Sean. Sean, take it away.
Thanks, Melinda, and afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good afternoon. We finally got some good weather. As Melinda said, I'm here to talk a bit about Bryden Johnson, a little bit about myself, but it's mostly about trying to help people get an idea what a career or a pathway into accountancy might look like. I'll kick off just by telling you a little bit about Bryden Johnson. We're a firm of chartered accountants. We're in Croydon. We've been based in Croydon for over 45 years now. I've just put up a little slide there which shows you a little bit about the history of Bryden Johnson. Originally set up in 1897, we're over 120 years old. I'm clearly nowhere near as old as that, but we have been in Croydon now for 45 years. You can see there a couple of, well, there's a little picture of me right over on the right-hand side, and there's pictures of my business partners, Neil and Jackie, who have also been in the business for some time now. So we're a firm of chartered accountants, let's say based in Croydon. We service the SME market. So we're looking after owner-managed businesses, typically turning over sort of between £1 million and up to 40 or 50 million pounds. And we look after a complete broad range and variety of clients across lots of industries, from GPs to construction companies. We look after insurance brokers, a whole raft of events companies, a whole raft of companies that we cater for. We've currently got a team of 25 staff. So there's 3 partners, myself, Neil and Jackie, and we've got 25 staff, and those staff are made up of a mix of people from people in payroll through to accountants, and we've got some admin support staff that help us along the way as well. So that's just a very little quick bit about Bryden Johnson. I'm going to skip back and talk a little bit about my journey through accountancy. I'll talk a little bit about kind of what made me get into accountancy first and foremost, and then kind of how things have panned out for me so far. I will also talk a bit about some of the team that we've got currently at Bryden Johnson. We've got a real mix of people that have found themselves working with us or found themselves working in the accountancy industry, and lots of them have actually had quite a different path into accounting compared to myself. So I think it's quite good to explore and talk to you a bit about how they've got into accounting, because it is less traditional than perhaps my route has been. So without further ado, as I said, I'm Sean, and I like most people, went to school, I did my A-levels, and like most people, had no idea what I wanted to do once I'd finished my A-levels. So I potted about for a little bit. I had a couple of jobs. I think I worked in a call centre, worked in a couple of pubs, up at golf club, whilst a lot of my friends headed off to university. Probably after a year or so of that, I realised that university seemed like quite a lot of fun, a good excuse to get away from the parents, and I decided to head off to university. And in doing so, I decided actually to do a degree in accountancy. There was a couple of reasons for that. I think the first one was that my aunt and an uncle of mine were both in the accountancy industry. I've always looked up to the pair of them, and I've always kind of thought, you know what, they seem to be doing okay for themselves. They seem to be fairly comfortable in life, and maybe that might be a path to sort of follow. So that was part of the reason why I chose accountancy. And I think the second reason I chose accountancy at university was I had quite a lot of friends that were doing, I guess what I'd say is more generic courses, kind of business studies or sports science and other bits and bobs. And I wasn't quite sure that, I think a lot of them weren't quite sure what that would lead to. And I felt like actually doing a degree at that particular time, when lots of people were doing degrees in something a little bit more specialised, might help me find a job at the end of it. So that's kind of the path that I started taking. So I went to university, did a degree in accountancy, scraped a 2-1. I did work whilst I was at university as a purchase ledger clerk at P&O Ferries, which did actually help me get some experience. So I was working within an accountancy function in quite a big organisation, and yeah, I got a reasonable amount of experience in terms of posting purchase invoices, working alongside other people in accounts function, and getting an idea kind of how an accounts function works and the various cogs that make up that function. So I did get some experience whilst I was at university, and then after I finished university, I came out and decided that, yeah, accountancy was for me. I wanted to find a role in accountancy, and at the time I was quite keen to find a role in practice rather than industry. I'll talk a little bit, perhaps a bit further on, about practice versus industry, just to give you a bit of a flavour, kind of how the two compare. But for me, working at P&O, I got a little bit of an idea what working in industry looked like, and I wanted a bit more variety in my start of my accountancy career. So I decided to head towards practice. I headed to recruitment agents, like most people do when they finish university, and didn't get very far. So a lot of recruitment agents were quite keen to push me, I think, into a role as quickly as they possibly could. A lot of those roles tended to be quite similar to what I was already doing previously, so sort of accounts clerk or purchase ledger clerk stuff. And I held fire. It took a little while, but eventually, after sending in my CV out myself to a few local firms, Jackie, I think, who is on screen now, my business partner. Well, sorry, she's my business partner now. She wasn't at the time. She took my CV on. She interviewed me, and she offered me a role at Bryden Johnson. So I started in Bryden Johnson in 2006. I started as an audit trainee. So that meant that I worked quite closely with some of our larger clients, doing their annual audits. And when I started at Bryden Johnson, I realised within a very short space of time that I didn't really know very much. So despite doing a degree in accountancy, and despite that degree supposedly giving me quite a few exemptions towards a chartered qualification, I realised actually that without the practical experience of working in a business like Bryden Johnson or in a practice in an accountancy firm, that actually some of what I'd learned at university hadn't stuck. I'm not sure all of that had to do with going out partying and drinking too much. So as I started Bryden Johnson, I realised I didn't know too much, and I had two options. Either I could use the exemptions that I had when I finished university, and the pathway that I could have taken was finishing ACA or ACCA, and I probably would have only had maybe 3 or 4 exams under each of those professional qualifications before I would have been exam qualified, and I probably could have done that within a year or so. But I realised that actually being exam qualified a year after joining Bryden Johnson actually wasn't going to set me up very well in the longer term, because although I might be exam qualified, I still didn't know things, and I needed to get to grips with some of the basics and fundamentals of accountancy. So I decided to take a bit of a step back when I joined Bryden Johnson and actually started my ACA, or I started a qualification with the Institute of Chartered Accountants, again effectively. So I started right from scratch. And started that at the tail end of 2006. So I did that for 3 years. Typically speaking, if you are doing one of the chartered qualifications, it does usually take somewhere between 3 and 4 years to get through that. I managed to do that in 3 years. I think I did fail a paper along the way, so there was a bit of failure along the way. But certainly I think the experience that I got at Bryden Johnson, working across, as I say, a really broad range of clients across a broad range of industries, really helped cement in with me kind of the stuff that I was learning theoretically to do the papers. So that's kind of the path that I took. As I say, I qualified late 2009, early 2010. I qualified, I became a chartered accountant, and again I took a step back and kind of assessed myself at the time and realised that I definitely didn't know enough I didn't know as much as I wanted to know, and I realised that I still had quite a lot to learn at Bryden Johnson, and decided to stay at Bryden Johnson for a bit more time and carry on learning. I got to about 2012, so I was 2 years post qualified, and I think that's when I really started thinking about what to do next in my career, and I started thinking about moving on and doing something different. I had some opportunities. I had an opportunity in industry, which did pique my interest, and I also thought about working in a larger firm. So, lots of you probably heard of the big 4 firms: Ernst & Young, PwC, KPMG. I've completely forgotten the last one now. But there's lots of big firms in accountancy, and at the time I did consider moving to one of the larger firms and getting a slightly different experience to what I had at Bryden Johnson. But I expressed that desire to learn a bit more or to do something different to the partners at the time. And they actually said to me that they would quite like to keep me in the business and put me on a route to partnership. So again, for me, I think I've always liked learning. I've always had an appetite for growth and development. And ultimately, I think for me, when I was reviewing what to do at that stage of my career, I knew that I wanted to be a business owner at some stage. So becoming a partner in a firm was highly attractive to me, and here I am today. So that's just a very brief bit about me, about my path through accountancy so far. And as I say, I became a partner in 2012. I can't quite believe that we're 2021 right now, and that the last 8 or 9 years has flown by. But I think one of the things that has really helped me or kind of made me feel very satisfied with my role at Bryden Johnson is the diversity that we get in a practice, in a firm of accountants. I've worked at Bryden Johnson, say, for 14, 15 years now. As you can see on the screen there, my business partners, Jackie and Neil. Jackie's been in the business for over 40 years. Neil has been in the business for over 35 years now. So we've got some people in the business that have been there for a good 10, 15, 20 years still. Lots of you might be sitting there thinking, how can anyone stay in the same business for such a period of time? Practice does keep things interesting. We, on a daily basis, really don't know, which client's going to call us, who's going to have a problem, what might need sorting out. Every day is very, very different. Every week's different. And I think the variety of practice is something that, kept me, Jackie, Neil on our toes, and has kept us, motivated to do the roles that we do at Bryden Johnson for the last 15, 40 and 35 years. That's a very, very brief bit about me. I will touch base on some of the pieces that I did speak about there. As I said, I spoke about the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and I will talk about some of the other pathways that you possibly can get into accountancy. I'm just going to jump quickly to our current team at Bryden Johnson. As I say, I took quite a traditional role, which was university, sitting papers with the ACCA and becoming qualified chartered accountant. But we at Bryden Johnson, we have a variety of people that come from all sorts of backgrounds. Going to university certainly isn't the be-all and end-all when it comes to becoming an accountant. And actually, in hindsight, I probably, had I known what I wanted to do at the time, I probably would have taken a slightly different path and saved myself a hell of a lot of money by not going to university and actually shortcutting some of this. So we've actually got some people in the team now that have done that. So just looking through the team at some of the names, we've got Jaden down the bottom. He's our accounts trainee. So Jaden's he was a school leaver, and he actually left school and went to work in retail. So some of you perhaps that are on this call right now, perhaps you're either working in retail or perhaps you've been really unfortunate throughout this pandemic and perhaps have lost a job in one of those industries that's been severely impacted. Jaden, fortunately, he joined us just before the pandemic, but he was working in retail. He was a school leaver. I had a very fortuitous phone call actually with Jaden, which I won't get into just now, but had a really nice phone conversation with Jaden, and he struck me as a really smart young chap, and he was looking for an opportunity. So we offered Jaden a role at Bryden Johnson as one of our accounts trainees. He's currently sitting his AAT, which is another qualification, which I'll jump into in a little bit of detail in a while. But he's sitting his AAT, which is traditionally more of a bookkeeping qualification, which then leads into accounting qualifications and perhaps some of the other, the chartered qualifications. But Jaden started that with us, so he's taken a bit of a different route, as I say, coming from school into retail, into accountancy, but he's absolutely doing amazing work for us, and he's certainly one to keep an eye on in future. Again, going across the team, we've got some other people in there. We've got Prasad. He's a recent joiner to Bryden Johnson. He came from another firm. He's currently sitting ACCA, which again is the chartered qualification. But he's actually got a desire to sit CTA, which is a chartered tax qualification. So he's working towards ACCA, CTA. So again, a slightly different pathway for him. We've got a few more people across the team here. So we've got Josh. who's up here as our bookkeeping and cloud specialist. Again, Josh was a university graduate, but actually went to go and work in the pensions industry. Various reasons wasn't getting on there, has joined us at Bryden Johnson. Again, he's sitting his AAT, and with a view to potentially moving on to chartered qualifications after that. And just one more person just throw in there, which is a guy called George. George is one of our more senior accountants now. He's been with us, I think, for about 7 years. He joined the practice, again, a school leaver. He actually was someone, I'm sure he won't mind me sharing, he's someone that jumped into ACCA, so the chartered qualification papers, and he struggled a bit to start off with, a bit like, you know, I probably would have struggled a bit when I first came to university. He struggled a bit with the level that the papers started at. So George, what we did with him is actually we took a step back, if you like. He started his AAT. George is now AAT qualified, and he is now sitting his ACA papers, and he's getting on just fine with them. And in terms of how George actually performs as an accountant, he's absolutely fantastic and brilliant. So again, I think, you know, taking George as an example, there's lots of different routes into becoming an accountant. You know, you don't have to just go towards ACA or ACCA. And then last but not least, just to throw in just one more person into the mix there, which is Steve Graham. Steve's one of our most experienced people at Bryden Johnson. Steve's not a qualified accountant, but that doesn't mean he's not very good at his job. He's actually fantastic at his job. So again, just to emphasise to people on the call, you know, professional qualifications, whilst I'm speaking quite a lot about them on this talk, they are not the be all and end all. Whether it's going to university or whether it's becoming a chartered accountant and, you know, having the ACA after your name or ACCA, that's not the be all and end all. There are lots of really good accountants out there that don't have professional qualifications. What they have done over a period of time is built up good experience working in good practices and working alongside good people and building their skill set that way. So certainly, you know, if exams and professional papers aren't attractive to you, don't let that put you off. It doesn't mean that you can't be an accountant or a bookkeeper or a good accountant or a good bookkeeper. So please do bear that in mind. I'm just going to jump onto the next slide, which is talking a little bit about, as I say, some of the memberships or the routes to membership that I spoke about earlier. I'll start off with AAT. So that's the Association of Accounting Technicians. As I said earlier, I think historically that kind of had it was kind of known to be what you might call a bookkeeping course. And it's certainly, what I'd say, a really good starting point for building up to becoming an accountant. Going back when I started at Bryden Johnson, there weren't many people studying AAT, certainly at our firm. And I think in a wider space, I don't think as many people were studying AAT. If you fast forward to today, I think AAT is actually a fantastic foundation in bookkeeping and accounting. And as I said when I was speaking about some of the team, we've probably got as many people now, or we certainly push most of our trainees towards AAT first, for them to build up a really good backbone, if you like, in accounting and in bookkeeping. So AAT, you learn your double entry, you learn about how to put together a set of accounts, you learn about how to use the accounting software that's currently out there and available to people. So you've probably heard, hopefully some of you on the call have heard about Xero and QuickBooks and Sage. AAT is a really good introduction to using those platforms, and it really does stand up well, I think, to helping people move towards the chartered or certified qualifications at a later date. So certainly when we're taking on, you know, trainees at Bryden Johnson today, we tend to push them towards AAT to make sure they've got a really good understanding of the fundamentals of accounting before they jump into one of the chartered memberships. That isn't for everyone. Some people do skip through AAT or skip past AAT, but I certainly would recommend AAT to anyone that's thinking about getting some exposure to accountancy. And actually, a very short story to share. Someone that's joining us next month, actually a friend of mine. And again, he's been working in retail. I'm sure he won't mind me sharing. He's in his mid-30s. He's been working in retail for the last 15 years. For quite some time now, he's thought about having a career change. And due to various circumstances, now's the time that he's decided to have that career change. I've actually been talking to him for probably about the last 6 to 9 months about what that might look like for him. And I did advise him to go and start his AAT. He was quite interested in becoming an accountant or getting into the accounting industry. My advice to him 6 to 9 months ago was, start your AAT, start AAT level 2 or start AAT level 3, and try and get some exposure to accountancy if you can. Maybe volunteer some hours with a practice somewhere, or at the very least, get hands-on with one of the accountancy packages that's out there, such as Xero or QuickBooks. Lots of us have got friends or family perhaps that run a business or involved with some bookkeeping. Lean on those people and ask, could you have a look at their accounting software? Could you have a go at entering some sales invoices, some purchase invoices, and reconciling the bank? Any exposure you can get, I think, quite early on is really helpful to understanding whether, one, you've got an interest in accountancy, and two, whether you've got the aptitude for it as well. So that chap that I'm talking about here, he's actually joining us in a month's time. So as I say, he's going to be a mature trainee for us. But again, he started his AAT. He's getting along well with that. So I think he's AAT level 3 qualified now. He's going to be joining us. He's going to finish his AAT. And actually, we're going to be looking at starting some chartered tax qualifications for him. So we're going to be leaning towards something different with him. But again, just to emphasise, AAT is a really good starting point, I think, for anyone thinking about getting into bookkeeping or accounting. The other two, well, ICAEW and ACCA. When I was training to become an accountant, I think there was and historically there's been a perception that the chartered status ICAEW is the premium qualification. I know Jackie, my business partner, would absolutely shoot me down at that. She's ACCA qualified, but yeah, they're very much the same qualification. I think ICAEW, Big Four firms tend to push their trainees towards that qualification, and I think it's, again, I'm guessing slightly here, I think it's been around a little bit longer in the UK, hence it's got some of that prestigious title. But ACCA is right up there alongside the ICAEW in terms of qualification. They both push people beyond, I think, the remit of AAT. So where AAT focuses first and foremost on sort of bookkeeping and accounts preparation, the chartered qualifications take you further than that. They take you towards, group consolidations, preparing large statutory accounts, a more detailed understanding of corporation tax, personal tax, and also I think open doors for you to do something perhaps different to what the AAT qualification would do. So usually, generally, if you find people that are working towards their chartered status, they might start with AAT and move on to something like the ACCA or ICAEW qualifications. And as I say, they really help people sort of specialise perhaps in a certain field. So it might be, working in audit. Certainly, I think the ICAEW is very heavily audit focused. So that might be a qualification to pursue if you're interested in that. Again, contrary to that, if the ACCA, I think, is more globally recognised across the world as a chartered certified qualification. So if anyone has any desire to go and work abroad, ACCA actually does transpose itself quite well to other countries. So certainly something to think about there. And then last but not least on the list there is CIMA. CIMA is a little bit different. I think ICAEW particularly is a qualification that's aimed at people working in practice, or it has been. That's not to say that people that have that status can't go on and work in industry. I think lots of people that work in FTSE 100 or FTSE 200 companies, quite often you'll see that the financial directors there are ACA qualified or have the FCA status. ACA and ACCA people, or people that study those, usually tend to start off in practice and then move on to do other things. CIMA's very much geared, or has been very much geared, towards people that work in industry. It has a focus less so on sort of statutory accounts preparation and corporation tax preparation, and more so on management accounts preparation and preparing statements or reports that people within the business might need, as opposed to what external stakeholders might need. I would say that although, again, when I was training, CIMA wasn't something that I was particularly interested. I would say that these days I can see CIMA being very, very valuable to businesses going forward. And when I say businesses, I mean both in industry and in practice. Accountancy today is quite different to how it was when I started 15 years ago, and it's very different to how it was when Jackie started 40 years ago. We are very much more reliant on technology. Technology does a lot of the heavy lifting that perhaps that we might have done manually previously. And so our roles are changing slightly in as far as some of the work that we did historically, and by that I mean preparing, let's say, statutory compliance documents. Some of the work now is done by software, and actually our role has become more key and more important to actually digest that information, to assimilate it, to understand it, and to give feedback, to summarize that information, and to add value using that information to help someone make a decision with it. So CIMA, as I say, it's been more focused on management accountants and working in the industry in the past, but actually going forwards, I can see myself as a partner of Bryden Johnson actually saying to some of our future trainees, I'd quite like them to sit CIMA because it will offer us something different in terms of how we can service our clients. So that's just a little bit about the main. Sorry, Melinda, you can ask me a question.
I'm trying to butt in there.
Yeah, go for it.
I've got a couple of questions actually from some of the attendees. One of them, I finished my level 3 AAT, or however you say it, AAT, starting level 4 this September. I've applied for over 100 jobs, no luck. Should I give up, or do you have any tips to take a different approach?
Definitely don't give up. That's heartbreaking if you have applied for 100 jobs, and that's awful. But definitely don't give up. What I would say is, as I said, I think it's still common now that if you go to recruitment agents, sometimes they're looking at CVs. And sorry for any recruitment agents that might see this, but I think they're looking at CVs, and they cherry pick people that have got experience because they might be easy to place first, quickly in practice or in industry. So what I would suggest is perhaps contact some firms, some local firms, some local practices. Perhaps offer them, some of your time. If you're trained and you've done level 3 and you're doing level 4, you've obviously got some understanding of accounting, of bookkeeping. I think maybe if you can, if you've got the time, maybe volunteer some hours or offer to volunteer some hours in a practice just to get a little bit of experience on your CV, because I think that really does help. Certainly if you're putting your CV out there with recruitment agencies, if you've got some experience, even if that's working for a couple of hours a week in an accountancy environment, I think that will really help set you apart from other people. And also, I think in the meantime, put your CV out there with some local practices. As I said earlier, Jaden and one of the chaps that's starting with us in a month's time, they had no experience when they joined at Bryden Johnson. Quite often it is the right place at the right time. The CV lands somewhere at the right time, but we do look at people, and certainly we don't just look at people that have got experience. We are looking for people that are looking to grow and develop. So yeah, don't give up.
Actually, that's a good point you make, Sean, about volunteering for some time. Perhaps have a look at some of the charities, local charities who are perhaps really struggling and needs some help, with accountancy and keeping their accounts clear. I know it's difficult, but we've all had experience where we've taken on or even been working as a volunteer and then actually landing a job because of it. So good point. I have another question here. There's somebody currently studying foundation certificate in accounting level 2. In the past 8 years, I've worked with our company accountant and decided to become an accountant myself. I would like to gain some experience by accountancy, but I'm finding it hard to find a flexible apprenticeship. Are you offering any apprenticeship places within your company for a few hours a week, or by working from home? Or can you suggest any other flexible apprenticeship anywhere?
We do have apprentices on in the practice, so we have taken on, again, I didn't say that earlier actually, some of the people that work for us now are on apprenticeship schemes. And again, historically, that's not something that was necessarily out there. And apprenticeship schemes are great as well because they aren't age capped. So, anyone at any age, I think beyond 16 or 18 can be an apprentice, and it works quite well for both the apprentice and for the business. We at Bryden Johnson do work flexibly. So we do have people that work part-time hours, and we have, flexible hours. So certainly that's something that we'd be open to. As of today, we don't have any vacancies right this minute. But if that person does want to send across a CV, I'm happy to have a look at it. And again, I know quite a few people that are accountants locally or run businesses locally. So, if I'm able to place that CV somewhere that might be able to help, I'll be more than happy to.
Okay, well, we'll get that sorted out for you, Sean, and we'll ask that participant to send in the CV to us. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Back to you then, Sean.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I was just going on to think a little about SEMA, and actually SEMA having a lot more value, I think, in practice than perhaps it might have done in years gone by. So certainly, if you're thinking about getting into accountancy, and again, if you're thinking about perhaps diversifying yourself from some of the other candidates that might be out there, and working in practice, I think SEMA is certainly a good route to take for the future. Last slide here was just a little bit about, if anyone is thinking about accountancy, perhaps hasn't started that journey yet, but isn't quite sure why they might get into it and what that might look like for them. There's just a couple of things there, a couple of examples of, some of the doorways that accountancy might open up for you. I think it's fair to say that lots of accountants have there's a bit of stigma around accountancy, and I think that actually being an accountant or training to be an accountant gives you a skill set that actually is highly versatile, and actually can open up doors in pretty much any industry for you. And there probably aren't many qualifications that can do that. So what I would say is that being an accountant doesn't mean you have to work in an accountancy practice. It can mean that you could work for any type of business across the world. So first and foremost, I think there's a lot to be said for that. As I say, for myself, being an accountant was partly a pathway to running a business. That was something that was really high on my to-do list. So that opened up a door for me. But again, if you are thinking about setting up a business or thinking about running a business in the long term, actually establishing some fundamentals in terms of understanding finances, understanding numbers, and understanding how a set of accounts is put together could really help you run any type of business. At Bryden Johnson, I know that we had someone in the past that actually went on to run a construction business, but he trained as an accountant, and I'm sure he would say that actually his construction business was a lot more successful because of some of the things that he learned in becoming an accountant. So being an accountant doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay an accountant. You could do something completely different, but it does give you a real good skill set that perhaps some other business owners may or may not have. And obviously, if you want to work, within accountancy, you want to stay in the industry, there are lots of different areas which you can specialise. So that, you've got audit, you've got tax. Tax could be corporation tax, it could be global tax, it could be personal tax. VAT, I don't know why anyone would want to specialise in VAT, but VAT is a highly specialised area. I know next to nothing about VAT, and by many people's merit, I probably do know quite a bit about VAT, but VAT is a complete minefield. So there are lots of different areas. Again, I've got a very good friend who's trained as an accountant and become an insolvency practitioner. There are lots of different areas that becoming an accountant or getting some of those qualifications under your belt should help you move towards, should you want to in the future. Have you got any more questions, Melinda?
Well, I haven't actually.
No? Okay.
No, I mean, accountancy just, I think it's just the fear of numbers. I'm one of those traditional kind of more art-based people who can't do numbers.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you raised that as well, because this is my key thing here. So I think I got a GCSE B at maths, so I was always quite like numbers. But again, I think it's a misconception actually that accountants are all good with numbers. I know lots of accountants that are no good with numbers. They're okay with one of these. They get by with one of these or Excel. And actually, for me, I think having an interest in numbers is probably something that you might want to have as an accountant. But actually, accountants these days, having an interest in people and being able to build relationships, I think, is just as important as being really good at numbers. At the end of the day, we are a service industry. We're servicing clients, we're very much focused on customer service. So a lot of what we do, and again, I didn't necessarily understand or appreciate this when I was training to become an accountant, but a lot of what we do isn't really a lot with numbers or working with numbers. A lot of it is talking to people, it's understanding their business and trying to help and add value to their business by giving them advice. So I think with software and lots of data out there, actually we're moving more and more away from needing to work with numbers or understand or I guess love numbers so much, and actually more towards being able to talk and communicate well with people to help them understand what's going on in their business.
I actually do have another question which has come in, Sean. Do you know where the best place to do an ACCA course is? I think this particular participant is not quite sure which one to pick. There's obviously a number of places you can go. So
yeah, I don't know about the best place, and I'm not sure where they're based. But I mean, I used a couple of training providers. I used Kaplan when I was training, and I used BPP. And a lot of our team still use those facilities. I'd say that they are very good. They're very professional. They've been doing it for a long time. But to put a plug out there for someone that's locally based, Pitman Training, who's based in Croydon. A number of our team have sat papers with them. So I think I actually did use different training providers when I trained. So I think find a training provider that works for you. Obviously, there's location to consider. But then there will be kind of a setup for each training. Each training provider will have a slightly different setup and they'll have different lecturers. So I think don't be afraid to perhaps start with someone and see if that works for you. And if it doesn't, then perhaps look at someone else. But certainly for me, Kaplan were very, very good. BPP were very good. And there is Pitman Training who are based locally who are very good as well. So
okay. I also have somebody asking, well, not necessarily recommending, but saying they did Sage, but is there a particular software that you would recommend that is more widely used or has a bigger range? Or
today I think, and I'm very biased here, and I have to be careful because some of our clients don't use it. And I think as accountants, we have to be flexible and open to using any type of software. And again, not all software works for one person, but I'm a huge advocate of Xero. So Xero is a cloud-based accounting package. And I think, again, we introduced Xero to the business about 9 years ago. And when we introduced it, I'd say probably 80% of our client base used Sage, maybe even 90% actually used Sage, and 10% used a bespoke package. So they worked in a certain industry that Sage couldn't cater for, and then they had a bespoke requirement. Today, I think more than 50% of our client base is on a cloud package, and most of them are on Xero. So I personally would say, if you're thinking about getting into accountancy, or if you're learning AAT, get a really good handle on the cloud packages that are out there at the moment. I would put Xero up there first at the top of the list, but also have a play around with QuickBooks Online and have a play around with Sage. I think it's called Sage Online now. Have a play around with that. Don't dismiss the traditional packages that are out there. And again, I think Sage is probably the highest one to consider. So Sage Line 50 is certainly helpful, having an understanding of how that works. But if I was talking to one of my trainees today, I would want them to focus first and foremost on Xero, QuickBooks, and Sage Online, rather than one of the traditional desktop packages.
Okay. Another question which has come in: are the ACCA training done online?
They are. So I think obviously the pandemic has changed the way in which a lot of us work currently, and the training houses have changed drastically as a result of the pandemic. So I believe that the likes of who I was just talking about a minute ago, BPP, Kaplan, etc., they are offering all of their training now as an online service, so you can have your lectures online. The classroom environment has moved to how we are now, working from home and doing your training in that manner. That doesn't work for everyone. Again, we've had some people in our team that are training that actually decided to put things on hold for the last few months because they prefer to be in a classroom with other people. But the training houses have made it available to those that are happy to work online.
Do you happen to know if there's kind of where the best place to access apprenticeships is in Croydon or the surrounding area? Or can you give advice on people looking for apprenticeships?
Yeah, I think Croydon College is usually a good place to start. I think Croydon College usually have a reasonable awareness of apprenticeships that are available. As I say that, to be honest, again, if you have a look on the AAT website, they do quite often list their opportunities that are available, and some of those might be trainee opportunities or apprenticeship opportunities. So I think have a look at some of the main body websites, because quite often they will flag post or signpost opportunities that are available. And again, I think if someone's interested in becoming an apprentice, I think quite often actually just writing to local firms and saying, this is my scenario, I'm interested in being an apprentice, are you considering taking anyone on at the moment, is possibly another way to perhaps open up that sort of door. But certainly, I'd say local colleges usually a good place to ask, because I think anyone that's looking for as a business owner looking for apprentices, they tend to start with local education houses, so they'll be aware of opportunities that might be available locally.
Okay, so what would you suggest to people who are doing a non-spec phone call or a letter or an email into you? How would they grab your attention? What would make you think, actually, do you know what, that person sounds like we could work with them, we could do something with them?
I think for me, particularly if we talk about someone that perhaps is either a school leaver or a career changer, I think for me it'd just be that at this stage of life, or whatever stage of life they're at, they haven't perhaps got any experience. So we're not looking for experience, but I think it's just showing a desire to learn is probably the key thing that we'd be looking for. Becoming an accountant, whether you want to do AAT or whether you want to jump onto the chartered qualifications, it's quite a commitment. I went to university, I studied for 3 years, I then did my professional qualifications, that took another 3 years. There was 6 years of learning for me, and the learning never really stopped. So I would say, we are always looking for people that have got a real appetite for learning. So if I'm looking at CV and we are looking at someone that can demonstrate an appetite for learning, and that might be they like reading books, or they've learned musical instruments, or they're learning to take part in other activities, or whatever it may be. Anyone that shows a desire for learning, I think that's probably the key thing that we'd be looking for, or someone that's thinking about taking someone on, they'd be looking for.
Okay, well, I think we're nearly there, aren't we, Sean? Anything other? One last I don't know, top tip or something?
Top tip. I think as I say, if I was thinking about career change or thinking about getting into accountancy right now, my top tip would probably be have a look at some of the online cloud-based packages that are out there. Something like Xero, for example, they offer a certification scheme, so anyone can jump onto Xero and become a Xero certified user. Just actually rattling your way through that certification program will give you quite a nice idea about what doing some bookkeeping might look like on a platform like Xero, and that might set you apart from someone else that's perhaps looking to do something similar to you. So my top tip would be to have a look at a platform like Xero, have a look at the certification program, and have a play around with it and go from there. Okay,
I've just got one last minute question, which
That's
is
fine. Go for it.
hot off the question press. This participant has just finished equivalent to level 4 diploma in management and finance 3 years ago.
Right.
They've got a year of experience in admin and commercial operations in Spain too, been living in London, like to come back and work in admin. What studies do you recommend for work and to develop a career in that field?
Is that more in the admin field?
It looks like it. Probably maybe admin and in an accountancy practice, maybe, or I'm not quite sure whether this.
I mean, they sound highly qualified already. So they sound like they'd be a great fit for working in sort of an administration or a office management role in a practice. I don't know off the top of my head what qualifications would be suitable, but I do know that we have had people in the past that have sat those qualifications that we're talking about there. So if you can get that person's details, Melinda, I'm more than happy to share that information with them. We definitely have someone in recent years that has that worked in our admin department. Sadly, they're no longer working in our admin department, but they worked in our admin department, and they did sit some professional qualifications to help with their skill set for us. So off the top of my head, I can't remember what the course was, but I certainly can share that. That's not a problem.
Great. Well, thanks very much for Sean. Very appreciative of that session, and thanks very much to Bryden Johnson for doing that. Participants, hang on a minute. I think this has got to be the very last one. Oh no, we're okay. So thanks very much for taking part in this. Our Ways2Work program does have a whole series of opportunities like this. So do take a look at our website. We will get the questions and the answers and the emails and the contacts to and from the people who've asked for their contacts to be sent on to you, Sean, and we can supply all the slides that you've shown us to the participants. So thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate your time. Hope you've enjoyed it, and hope to see you at another one. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.